Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to get an opportunity to talk to some extraordinary Fulbright scholars. Helen, I'd like to start with you. As we begin this conversation, where are you?
I am in my dorm room in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the United States.
And are you there most of the time, given the restrictions that are in place right now because of COVID?
Yes, unfortunately, it's I'm here most of the time, so it's a very small amount of space I have to be by myself, but I do exercise outdoors, so I guess that's the perk. And the weather is nicely warming up here finally, so that's good.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're busy in your room. Let me go now, if I can, to Jared. Where are you at this moment, Jared?
So I am currently in my car, parked in a Starbucks parking lot in Pueblo, Colorado.
And why are you in your car, Jared?
Internet connection issues. So it's been a little difficult managing Zoom classes and writing a thesis while I'm here in Colorado, but I'm making do.
All right, thanks very much, Jared. Liz, where are you joining us from?
Yeah, I am in Northeast Ohio, in Kent, Ohio, in an apartment that I am currently subletting from my sister. So I've kind of moved into her space for the time being.
All right. Well, and in terms of where you are, Liz, where did you expect to be right now?
Yeah, so I definitely expected at the beginning of the year to be living in Parramatta in Sydney, still working on my thesis, taking courses. I'm really grateful that I've been able to continue taking courses, but now online and largely from this apartment, which is now home.
And you were intending to work, as I understand, on policy that affects LGBTQ refugees.
Yeah, so I was doing a Master of Research, and my research focus was on policy affecting LGBTQ refugees. I'm really grateful that Western Sydney University and Fulbright have been really helpful in allowing that research to continue. So I'm still researching, still working on that, but in a kind of different place and scenario than what was expected.
And in terms of what you're doing with your free time, I understand that you've taken on another job at the moment that really puts you on the front lines.
Yeah, so I am working as an emergency medical technician in Ohio, which is an exciting opportunity as well as full of uncertainty. I'm working for a private ambulance company, so we're seeing a variety of people who had medical conditions who are now increasingly vulnerable because of COVID-19, as well as some patients with COVID-19 and trying to manage some of the changes that have happened really quickly for the EMS world.
So you're staying busy. I want to come back and talk about more of that in a moment, but first I want to go to you, Jared, because when we talk about refugees, that's also a hallmark of your work, isn't it?
It is, yes. In fact, I study refugees as it relates to UN international law and climate change. So looking at people all across the world, and especially my particular area of focus is throughout the Pacific region, and looking how, as people are displaced by climate change, what's going to happen to them, where are they going to go, and kind of what mechanisms can we have in place that will help provide for those people.
And that's going to be particularly difficult for some of those Pacific Islanders because they could literally lose the ground under their feet.
Absolutely, yes. So the thing is kind of as the COVID crisis is sweeping across the world right now, I think it's important for us to remember that even though we're at home, these issues aren't going away. And I think so often these people, especially when they're facing climatic forces like this, I guess it's a matter of they have nowhere to go. And unfortunately, kind of the area that I'm studying goes to show that there's not really any laws in place either that kind of really can protect them and or provide for them. So I'm kind of looking forward to fully getting back into that work once again.
I'm sure you are. Helen, we're joining you, as you mentioned, in your studio apartment, but the fact that you're in a small space hasn't stopped you from doing all the research that you've been up to. Tell me what you've been working on with your Fulbright scholarship.
Yeah, certainly. I've been focused on international and global affairs, which ties in with my career in diplomacy. So this year I focused a lot on sort of the decoupling, I suppose, of the Western economies and Western political systems with other parts of the world, particularly China. So I've been focused on particularly misinformation, disinformation, as well as the sort of broader AI supremacy race that's happening right now, and be interesting to see what will happen after COVID, because this is, I think, just put a pause on things.
And I think that's a really important point, because COVID just interrupted. It was almost as if it froze everybody in place. And yet that's not really true. I mean, look at the work that you're doing. You're continuing. How has COVID changed the equation and changed what you're doing?
I think it's accelerated every of the trends that I've been studying. So the trends of sort of supply chains, and also the trends of the decoupling of the tech sectors in both the Western world and also in China. And also it's just sort of shed light on a lot of the problems with the international or multilateral communities and multilateral organizations. And has really posed questions for global leaders about how they can cooperate together in a truly global pandemic that's being faced by every country.
Yeah, I want to go, if I can, now to you, Jared, and touch on that. This notion of international cooperation is crucial, whether we're talking about COVID or climate change. But is that sense of the conversation being paused, Jared, hurting us when it comes to climate change?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that keeps popping up in the news right now is that we are seeing historic lows in carbon pollution over the past several months now that everybody's staying inside. But even still, that's not a demonstrated commitment to what climate change is. And it's not, when the world gets back to normal, the unfortunate thing is that carbon levels are going to go back to normal as well. So it's sad that we are in a position now where kind of all of these very salient issues that were affecting society that all of us were working on did kind of hit a pause button. And there is a time and a place to hit pause, but unfortunately, a lot of the work that even all three of us here are doing affects a lot of lives, and it's really hard to press pause on human lives.
So then how do you change that? What are you doing with your research to try to reach out from your car in the parking lot to get that message out to people?
Right. I mean, at least for me, it's finishing up my thesis, kind of working out what my personal next steps are, because I, at least personally, am kind of entering a field and going into a field of policy that is incredibly undiscovered, I guess, at this point. So there's not a whole lot of people that are working in this space. So for me, it's a matter of getting the education that I need, where my voice has the credibility that it needs to have in order to make sure that some of these policies are getting through, and that the people are taking this seriously.
Liz, if I can go to you, that notion of the pause button and communities that aren't getting the attention perhaps they need and deserve with these big issues, is that an issue in your research as well? Are you concerned that it will be forgotten?
Yeah, I'm concerned on one hand that it'll be forgotten. Also, there's so many people who are really fighting the good fight to connect people with resources and ways to protect their rights, who are going to be pulled in even more directions in terms of navigating their own personal security and health while trying to do their work. I'm also concerned that there's situations where COVID-19 has opened up opportunities for people who do not support refugees and immigrants to kind of take advantage of the situation. So we recently saw a couple hundred unaccompanied children were deported from the United States. Crises like these offer a lot of strains that are on the surface, but at the same time, it means that there's less attention that actually allows for other actors to capitalize on. So it's partially about forgetting, but also looking at the people who haven't forgotten and making sure that we are doing everything that we can to keep the people who are supportive of the cause also in the conversation.
And is there a way with people, if you will, all having the sense of all being in our houses, maybe some people, for good reasons and bad reasons, having a little bit more time on their hands, is there an opportunity to reach out and create networks that haven't existed to help people in that community and refugee communities around the world?
Yeah, I think there are always opportunities. And I don't want to paint the situation as positive, because the reality is that people who are already vulnerable are struggling even more in this circumstance. But absolutely, there are silver linings, and there are ways for us to build solidarity in ways that we probably hadn't before, looking at creating more conversations online with each other is definitely something that people can be doing. I encourage anybody who's doing work that is in the social sector to do a lot of reading, partially to check our own biases. And I think that's one of the best uses of time as people are home that we can do is really to get familiar with some of these issues. You know, so often when we're busy working, we might see a news headline and just scroll past it, but this is really a good time for people to read a little bit deeper, read some personal stories, and learn about the human side of some of these issues.
Thanks, Liz. I want to go to you, Jared, for a moment. I think it's important also to think about this opportunity. Again, not one you wished for, you were planning things to be different, Jared, but in terms of kind of reconnecting with your base, can you talk a little bit about your journey? I mean, you're a Fulbright scholar. Was that exactly what you expected when you were growing up in Colorado?
I mean, not at all. I'm a first generation college student, so I had no idea what I was doing going into undergrad, no idea about applying for scholarships. And really, I'm just thankful for all of the incredible people that I was surrounded by and kind of the experiences that I was able to engage in, because so many people pointed me in the right direction that were from kind of non-traditional sources. I wasn't necessarily going to family members to ask them for advice, but luckily I had a bunch of professors and university officials that were always willing to kind of help me and lead me along and show me where to apply for things and how to go about the process. So I think for me in having a very non-traditional journey, I don't know, I guess in some ways it's kind of prepared me for the unexpected. So at this point, I just kind of take every day as it comes and just kind of living each day gratefully at this point.
I want to ask all of you for advice at this stage. And for you, Jared, I want to ask your advice for university students. A lot of universities are still deciding how they're going to go back, if they're going to go back. And there are also those people who, like you, are first generation, or maybe they haven't been able to apply yet. And this is highly disruptive for all of them. What's your advice to the young man or woman who's out there who hasn't got the funds necessarily and who really dreams of an educational opportunity? What do they do in this era of COVID?
I think the most important thing to keep in mind right now is just don't give up, because even though it may seem like the world is on pause, it's not. And kind of all of these things are happening behind the scenes, and it's a matter of being creative in the ways that you're pursuing your dreams and your goals. Like I'm sitting in a Starbucks parking lot right now. So the thing is like people are adapting. I'm not unique in that sense. I know plenty of other people that have it way worse than I do right now. So it's making sure that even though there are complications, and even though those complications are affecting people disproportionately throughout communities across the US and across the world, trying to make the best of it and trying to come up with creative solutions, even when it is getting exceptionally difficult in some areas.
Well, Helen, let me go to you because I saw you smiling at that. And I mean, there has been enormous disruption. What is your advice for people who are in the midst of this disruption, who might not have a job at this moment, or who might have their job have changed dramatically? What's your advice for folks as they make their way through COVID times?
Yeah, I mean, I want to build on Jared's point of resilience and adaptability and sort of being comfortable with the ambiguity and the unknown, because there's really a lot of things that are out of our control. And so I think my advice to people would be to just try and take each day as it comes, and to try and control the things that are within your control, such as your physical health, your relationship with good ones, and then try and keep patient and focused on getting out of this pandemic. I mean, it's, as Jared and Lisa both said, this is not forever. This is putting a pause on life as we know it, but we've got to remain resilient and adaptable in meeting these challenges.
Liz, I'll go back to you. In terms of that, you've paused and you've done something different. You didn't expect to be an emergency medical worker in Ohio right now. What have you learned from that experience that's helped you or changed you in these COVID days? Because it isn't what you expected to be doing.
Yeah. I think the biggest takeaway is, even in really difficult times, just the importance of connecting with each other and relying on each other, and really basic kindness is, I think, what's going to get us through all of this. You know, like some of the patients that we have are in really horrible conditions, and doing even small things to try to improve their comfort, or you know, make their journeys a little bit easier, I think is really important. And I think that applies to everyone right now. I think we have to take care of each other. And that's going to be whoever falls into our circle, whether it's family, friends, neighbors. I think that's how we're going to really get through the difficulties that we're facing as a society right now.
I think that's good advice. As we close, I want to ask each of you, Liz, I'll start with you. What do you hope to achieve in your research? What do you, as it continues and when you finish and when you submit, what do you want to show or change?
Yeah, so many things. One of the things that I'm really interested in is getting more visibility, and also looking at the ways that we can be more creative in policy to help meet human needs. So there needs to be more conversation about gender and sexual minorities who are displaced. There needs to be more conversation about people who are displaced in general, and what their experiences are. So part of doing this work is always attention raising, but I'm really excited about the way that we can potentially change policy, and start to explore some of the ways that policy could be different to meet people's needs better. And I don't know what that looks like, but that's the big goal. So this, a 2-year thesis is really just a part of that, but I hope that I can contribute to that kind of bigger picture.
And Jared, how about you? What do you hope your research will achieve? What do you hope to change? How do you want to see this going forward when it comes to climate change and refugees?
I mean, I think my answer is very similar to Liz's as well, in the sense that, I mean, short-term goal is to graduate at this point in a very unconventional way, but long-term, in terms of looking at the policy, is being able to enter this field in a way where I can help contribute toward the creation of policy, because in what I'm studying, there's tens of millions of people affected now, and in the next several decades, in the next half century, there's going to be hundreds of millions of people affected. And frankly, it's painful seeing how little work has already been done within this field, and me as a 20-something-year-old studying it right now, knowing that so much more needs to happen. I guess for me, it's just a matter of making sure that I'm situating myself in a place where I can help contribute toward the creation of policy and making a difference.
Do you think, in a way, that as much disruption as we've seen from COVID-19, we could see as much or more from climate change in coming years?
I certainly hope so. And I mean, it will take a radical response like what we've had to COVID, because in a matter of months, the entire world has been forced to respond. And I just hope that that response comes before climate change necessitates that response, because we're in a unique position right now where our actions can be changed and they can have a meaningful impact on the bottom line. Because I would hate to see us in a situation where in a 3 or 4 month window, life is fundamentally altered because of what happens with climate change.
And Helen, if we finish with you, tell me what you're hoping to achieve. You've been in the diplomatic world, now you're there as a student in your dorm room, in your studio apartment. What do you hope to see happen as a result of your research, and what do you want to work on going forward?
Yeah, I want to work on, I think, reimagining multilateralism. I know that sounds like a really sort of like gimmicky thing to say, but I think as both Liz and Jared have touched on, COVID has really kind of short-circuited the status quo and really forced people from all industry to really reconsider the way that existing practices of things are done. And so I think I would like to apply that to multilateralism and think about creative ways which the world can obviously harness their energies and focus on the one thing to focus and to address common issues. So I would really like to think about other ways to revitalize the multilateral system to address some of our biggest challenges, including climate change.
You know, Helen, I think about that when I have this conversation with you. I think we hear words like multilateralism, and we think the global stage, and it all seems very vast, very difficult for one person to enter and make a difference and really change that. But there you are in your studio apartment, working hard on that. Is it possible? I mean, how do you engage people to realize that, you know, the world is all of us and that one person can make a difference?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, and one that I think I don't need to sort of get out of my dorm room to really try and implement. But I think what we're seeing with, you know, with leaders around the world and the way that they've managed to sort of use this to bring unity to in spite of the disaster, I think that it really has inspired, whether for good or for bad, but in many countries it's inspired national unity and to sort of understand this crisis as one that faces all humanity. And I think, you know, when we compare it to climate change, it's also the same vein, because we are all human beings on this earth. And when we see that when we can work together, we can achieve a common outcome, then that's really inspiring. So I hope that by harnessing this same message and sort of getting all international leaders on board, we can really, you know, push the needle on climate change eventually.
Well, thank you. Thank you to all three of you for joining us for this conversation. And we wish you all the very best in your studies.
Thank you so much, Sarah.